Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Atlantic Bushcraft Adventures, coming to you a few days later, as you folks may have summarized there. And that's all my fault, folks. I dropped the ball here. I did approach Ben there a few nights ago and said, hey, Ben, do you mind if we reschedule the podcast? I have something going on that night. Melissa and I were heading to a Papa Roach concert, and everything was good. And I was supposed to post up that we were going to reschedule it for last night. Forgot to reschedule it, got home yesterday morning, went immediately to a fire call, from the fire call to work, came back, had to go to swimming classes with Lily, got her home cleaned up, started wrapping presents, forgot about everything. So here we are tonight. So that is 100% my fault. I'm not saying it's a legitimate excuse, but that's just what happened. In any case, tonight, we're talking about bushcrafting. Bushcrafting then and bushcrafting now. And Ben and I were just chatting about this before we came on. And once again, I'm going to be 100% transparent with this. This is a topic that I am piggybacking off another podcast I heard a few weeks ago. And for the life of me, I can't find it. The second I do, I'm going to include it in the comments and give full credit to them. They were talking about it in a sense about an educational standpoint for people that teach bushcrafting, woodscraft, woods therapy, things like that. But it got me thinking. How has bushcraft changed since I was a kid? And when I'm saying I was a kid, let's talk like 80s, 90s to now. Because frankly, that seems like a long time ago, but it's really not that long ago. You know what I mean? It's really not that long. But bushcrafting itself has changed drastically. Maybe not the skills, but the way that people acquire and transfer the information has changed. You know what I mean? And this is kind of what Ben and I were talking about literally just as we normally do. We run late, come on late, and here we go. Hey, Eric, thanks for joining us there, buddy. You found us on the new night. And what I want to talk about was the main point I had, which was Ben and I were talking about here, was when I was a kid, the skills I was being taught as a kid are now the skills we're teaching to full-grown adults at the same way. So when I was a kid, and this is what we were saying, I remember going on TV and you'd see these little Field and Stream snippets and things like that. As a young person, if you get lost in the woods, here's what you do. Take your pocket lighter and your pocket knife. You make, some shavings. You make a small fire. Stay by a tree. Adults will be here to help you. Now, the funny thing is, we are teaching the exact same skills to full adults when I was a kid, as a full-grown adult, you were just expected to know that. It was common sense. It wasn't bushcrafting. It wasn't woodscraft. It was, if you don't know it, you're going to die. You know what I mean? And that's kind of how it always was. What about you, Ben?
Well, yeah, I can give you that, but there's so much more to it. You talk about this. I'm immediately thinking about what was in our pockets when we were that age and what's in my kids' pockets, and it's a totally different ball game. Like, they're not carrying what I carried when I was their age. In fact, they'd probably be sent home, and I may even have a police officer to have a conversation with if they showed up in school in their pockets with what I went to school with. But you say if that doesn't feel that long ago, when we were growing up, the 40s and 50s were just as far away as the 80s and 90s are today.
Fair point. I don't want to think about that, but fair point.
So we thought of that as ancient. So it is. Like, the 80s and 90s are a long time away. A lot of our viewers are potentially, especially if they're young adults, weren't even alive in the 80s and 90s. You know what I mean? And then the people that are alive, they're like us, Gen X and was it Xennials?
There's what I get. Gen X, Zennials, Millennials. I don't know. I don't keep up with it anymore, man. I don't even know where I fit into that group anymore.
You were born in 80,
84, 85. I'm like technically a millennial, but I was raised super old, so I think I fall into that Zennial. But I more relate to Gen X because I'm old and gruff and I have the, put some dirt on it, move on mentality. I don't know anymore.
Yeah. So, but yeah, there's that crossover time that a lot of us fall into, and I mean that's where we are. We're more Xennials, I guess, but it's really interesting. But I went to school. I had pieces of rope. I definitely had a pocket knife. Oftentimes I might have had a small compass of some kind. I probably in my backpack had a Rambo knife with a little survival kit in it, and my evenings, I was probably out blueberry picking, fishing, taking the bicycle into the woods. And now, like, despite the fact that our kids have cell phones and access to wireless devices that can communicate to you from anywhere in the world. I mean, the average cell phone now has the ability to contact satellites and send an SOS message. Despite them being safer than they could have ever been, they go less far. Their freedom is not what we had. And so exactly, like, you know, a young adult today may never have spent a night in the woods, may never have camped, may never have set up a shelter in the woods or had to create a campfire when it was a common day thing for us. We had what you called boil ups. You mentioned this earlier today when we were talking. That was a big thing in Newfoundland. Like, you know, you went in with a cup of coffee or tea, or, you know, the ingredients to make this. You went in the woods and you boiled it up, and you had maybe a sandwich, maybe some Vienna sausages, and that was like your evening. That was like a day of adventure, and it was really fun. And then you'd eat any blueberries you found or anything else that was edible. Maybe you'd fry up a fish or something if you got one, and that would be kind of your day out. It's a different thing today, and I think there's room now that there's actually maybe even like a potential business thing of taking actual adults out so they can experience this, because they haven't. They were never taught how to do that, and it seems weird to us. So yeah, I guess that's kind of where I'm thinking now. Like, I didn't see this other show, so I don't know where they went with it, but it'd be interesting to see if I come anywhere close.
Like I said, when I find the link, I will send it over to you. Just saying hi to Eric again there, Andrew. We got Steve, the Drifting Spore. We got Matt Wosley joining us here again. Hey there, folks. And I don't like the way you said this, Stephen. I'm not going to lie to you. I was there in the late 1900s. Stop making me feel old. Right? So, what got me hooked was a PBS show about Tom Brown Jr. I was hooked from that moment on. That's from Eric. And we were talking about a show, too. Actually, it was one that Ben had mentioned. And what was the name of that again there, Ben?
Newfoundland Outdoors.
And Lloyd, I will put a link to some of their stuff in this description.
Lloyd and Bryce, I grew up on these guys. This was one of my father's favorite things to watch. My grandfather watched it, and I sat and watched many a show, and it's just two old guys. They were old guys to me, and they used to get in an old truck, and they went out hunting, and they'd go fishing, and they documented their adventures, and then they put it on CBC, and it was quality TV, probably the best TV show ever released in history of Canada, in my opinion. But it was so low budget. Like, it was literally taken on basic camcorders for the time. And, you know, but it was so enjoyable to watch. You could hear the crackle in the fire and him talking in the background. He did like voiceovers of his videos, and they talked about the successes or the failures. Sometimes they caught nothing. They didn't really care. And it was a really cool show. But it's the only thing that I can think of from our generation that really showed that way of life. It was just taken for granted. That's just what people did. And it was, you know, the way it used to be.
And it's kind of funny, once again, and I keep saying things are funny, but another thought. The market is saturated right now with videos. You can jump on YouTube and literally figure out how to do anything. The thing is, it's a niche market. There's only a handful globally of people that actually dive into those markets and bushcrafting and stuff like that. Whereas Ben was saying previously, it was a way of life. Everybody knew the basic skills. As Ben was saying, pocket knife, some sort of lighter. Let me back up. I remember my everyday carry going to elementary school now, folks. It was a double-bladed buck knife, maybe a Swiss Army knife if you had a little bit more money, generally some form of lighter, and I had a magnifying glass that had a compass on it. You know what I mean? That was in my pockets at all time. And I still remember, though I was not a part of this generation officially, if there's any police out there listening, I can still remember coming out of school for people to jump into their vehicles and still had shotguns behind the seats. Maybe not hanging in the window, but in a case properly stored behind the seats because they were going to go hunting for whatever, be it small game. Usually it was birds, small game. That was my thing back in the day. I hadn't gotten into big game. But anyway, yeah, it was nothing to like jump in the truck. Oh, where are we going today, Dave? Oh, let's go out to the field. You know, there's some apple trees back there. We'll get a couple pheasants. Shotguns behind the truck. We'll just leave them in or we'll take them to school with us. Leave them behind the seat, no problem. You imagine some kids doing that nowadays. That's how you get SWAT teams called to schools, you know what I mean? Like,
right? I mean, I know there was probably shotguns brought to our school and left in lockers. So I don't remember seeing it, but and most of us didn't have access to cars, and it wasn't a long walk to get to home. I literally had 45 feet to walk to school
You
from
poor
my
soul.
and that's stretching it. Like honestly, I was so close to the school, I might as well have lived in the school, and I still managed to be late for class. But we used to go check our slips, our rabbit slips. So a lot of us growing up, not all of us, some of the hockey players less so maybe, but I'm just picking on hockey players. It's not fair. But a lot of us had rabbit slips. We'd have a run, so we'd go in the morning. You get up, an hour or two earlier, and you take the ATV or the snowmobile, and you go out
Dirt
and you
bike.
check like whatever you had that was mobile to get you there, and you check your slips in the morning, and then you go back maybe again in the evening and check them. But you check them at least once a day. If you got a couple of rabbits, you had a brace of rabbits, then you brace of rabbits, you find somebody to buy them or you cook them up yourself. Like I usually had 4 or 5 rabbits available when I was hunting, and then I always knew somebody who was interested in getting some. Like old Miss Ivney down the street, she would always buy some if you had some. So it was a thing.
But even that itself, that doesn't happen anymore. I guarantee you I know what your answer is going to be. How much did you get for a pair of rabbits?
Oh, $4 or $5 maybe.
I was going to say $5 to $10. That's the magic number. Now, one, if you went door to door and said, hey, I got some rabbits, do you want to buy them? They'd probably call the cops on you. And two, ain't nobody going to buy your rabbits even if they didn't call the cops on you. And three, you'd never get them for like $5-10 anymore. But once again, this is what the kids used to do, folks, and this is what's kind of astounding, is that was a thing, not only for us country bumpkins, because we were probably a little further out than the average, but even in closer to the main areas, as you got, just outside the city, people were still doing this. It was just common things. Nowadays, and this is kind of where I want to go with this topic, everything's changed, and I think it's come down to the way the information's absorbed. One, bushcrafting, or back in the day, it wasn't even really bushcrafting. We called it like woodscraft. It was just the ability to be more comfortable when you were in the woods, because there was no if you were in the woods. You were going to be in the woods at some point in your life, most likely at some point in that day. You just learned to live with it. It was part of your surroundings. Nowadays, there are people that go their entire lives and never see a forest. I have a buddy from down south that one of his big hopes and dreams was to see the ocean. Once again, I take that for granted. I see it every day. You know what I mean? I go out the end of the highway, I see the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah.
But I never thought about it. There's people that literally never see this stuff, never experience this stuff. As kids, we were always taught this. It was passed down generation to generation. I remember going into the woods with my grandfather, my father, my family to do brush hunting, just walking, logging, whatever. And all of these skills were passed down. We didn't take lunches in the traditional sense in a lunchbox, much like Ben said. We took like tea wrapped in mason jars, or sorry, not wrapped in mason jars, stored in mason jars with newspaper wrapped around it, and then like a tea towel. And that would keep every bit as good as a normal thermos nowadays would. You would end up with like a hunk of bologna and a hunk of cheese wrapped up in wax paper. And you'd have a little mustard with it, maybe some bread, usually homemade, also wrapped up in something. And when you broke for lunch, you just sat down, you pulled your knife out, you cut your bologna up, you cut your bread up, you made your sandwiches. If it was a day that you felt like it, you made a little fire, you had toasted bologna sandwiches or something like that. But once again, could you imagine in any industry nowadays that's not exclusively in the woods where that would happen? But that was common practice, not even just for the woods folk, so to speak. That could happen like at the fish factory. Literally somebody go out back and start a small fire and they would have like, in essence, a small boil up. Get outside, have a little fire, cook some stuff, drink some hot liquids, and then go back to work. It was a staple of life where I was from. Forestry, fishing, and farming were major industries here in Atlantic Canada, and all three of them, that's how they lived, day in and day out.
I mean, forestry for us, like Dad cut us all his firewood. Like I can remember just going in stacking firewood. We've talked about this before. And then the other thing is, like farming, this is something else I don't know that modern kids would. I can remember planting potatoes, carrots, tomatoes, peas, anything else that you could grow. Newfoundland did not have the greatest growing season in the world, so we were fairly picky in what we grew. Yeah.
We get months for 8 year or sorry, we get winter for 8 months of the year here in Canada. Newfoundland probably 10.
Yeah, your growing season is short, and the soil wasn't necessarily super great for a lot of the province, so you had to deal with what you had. We had compost piles we maintained, but here's a question: I've been to stores where they sell worms. Like I cannot imagine buying worms growing up. Like
I
we
bought
had
worms for the first time in my life this year for Lily because she asked to buy worms. And I still shake my head with that. How did you get worms as a kid if you didn't have a shovel?
we turn over rocks.
Turn over some rocks.
Like,
Why would you pay for bait?
If I was out fishing, I mean, here's the skills you had. I knew how to set up a fishing rod before I could talk pretty well. Like I don't remember not being able to fish. If I've ran out of worms for whatever thing, because we always had a little thing of worms, the little thing that went on your belt. We always had those full of worms.
Oh, those little plastic things? Can you even still get those?
Yeah, you can. I'm sure you can. But we would at the cabin, we had spots where there was always worms, and we knew to go what to do. But if you were in on the river and you were fishing and you ran out of worms or whatever happened, you just went in the woods for a few minutes, found a rock, flicked it over, and you grabbed 2 or 3 worms from out and under it. All right, or you grabbed a couple of berries and stuck onto the hook. But I've seen people. And I remember we made fun of them because they were like city folk. Imagine didn't know how to put a worm on a hook so it wouldn't just fall off the second you cast it. Right? It's a skill.
Absolutely.
I didn't realize it was a skill. It's something you just knew.
And a term I've been coining lately is we always considered it common sense, but there is no such thing as common sense. There's acquired knowledge. And the ability to give that knowledge to acquire has changed drastically. We are in a technological world where most people do it with their phones. You know what I mean? Oh, what's on YouTube there? Now I know how to do it. And everybody's becoming a YouTube expert for what they need to be in. Like everybody has their field of interest. Ours happens to be the woods. But I mean, if something comes up, they learn a skill very temporarily, very quickly to get them through. And then it's just in one ear and out the other. I don't need that because I can look it back up. So those skills, as people started coming out of the woods, they just didn't pass them along anymore because they didn't need to know them. And this is the story I was telling Ben just before we came on. I have friends that came over earlier this year, and they were looking at the wood stove, and they're like, oh, God, it must be so nice to have wood heat. And I'm like, oh, yeah, it's great. If you want to make a fire, go for it. And literally, they're like, well, where would you start? And I'm like, well, just, crumple up some paper, throw in, and go from there. And their solution was literally to crumple up the paper, set it inside, take roughly a 6-inch block of wood, set on top of that paper, and light it up. And like I was telling Ben, I don't care how dry that wood is, you're not going to get a successful fire going with that. It's not going to be an accomplished fire. It might light, it might smolder away for ages, but you're not going to have a crackling fire. And I walked by and I was literally taken back by like, that's not going to work, right? And they just kind of look at me like, what do you mean? And I just kind of went, oh, okay, you've never actually learned to build a fire. Once again, this is a skill I took for granted. Everybody, in my eyes, should have the basics of knowing how to build a fire. I don't care if you got wood heat or not. You should at least know how to make a fire. But that's a skill that's gone. You know what I mean? Like, unless somebody is giving this information out, like potentially Atlantic Bushcraft Adventures, or you're learning it from somebody else in your life, if no one shows you, how do you learn to build a fire? Unless you trial and error it. But if you don't have a reason, you're never going to do that either.
How did you learn to use an axe?
Trial and error.
How old were you? Like, what training were you given to use an axe? And when you got in fire,
dead serious, how did I learn to use an axe? I learned with a hatchet, of course, because I was small. I was probably 4 or 5. Yeah. My grandfather handed me a hatchet and said, don't let the sharp end hit your skin. Sent me on my way. You know what I mean? And that was it. And I was like, well, what do you do with it? And he's like, well, you'll figure it out. Sharp end cuts wood, doesn't cut you. Keep the two apart, go have fun. And I mean, once again, old school mentality. They probably just wanted us out of their hair. I'm not going to lie. Here's an axe. Go find something to do. But still.
No care but your social or physical well-being when they give it to you.
We are truly from the last generation. When you woke up, you were told to get out and don't come back till the streetlights come on. Don't care where you go, but don't come back.
I can remember being given a hatchet and told, here's some firewood, go split it up. And I sat down, I split firewood for hours. Dad came down and had to take it away from me. And then I was let to go in the woods, and it's like, you can cut trees with this. And I'm like, oh, I can cut trees. So I just went in the woods. I started knocking trees down. I guarantee you can go out now and find a grown adult and say, listen, we need to knock that tree down. And they wouldn't know where to start. They would look at you confused. And they might even try and take like a handsaw, like from like a construction handsaw, and try. It's like, no.
There's a proper tool for that. But even going past that, give them a chainsaw and say, hey, cut that down. 90% of them aren't going to know about notching and back cutting, dropping, directional falling. Like, once again, all skills that are acquired by trial and error or somebody teaching you. I never thought about it, but there's a lot to just splitting a piece of wood. You said you were splitting a piece of wood. If I was to give somebody a splitting axe and tell them, hey, split that wood, a lot of times you just see them, they literally, I don't even have anything here that I can use a demonstration, but they just take the axe straight up and straight down. Like, it looks like the old windmill guys that you used to see on the top of the picket fences. It's just up and down. You're like, you're never going to get any strength out of that. But once again, there's a way to throw an axe. And if you're not shown that, but those are the skills we all took for granted, because if you didn't, you froze to death. Like, I grew up with wood heat my entire life, except for 10 years when I lived over in the other house before I moved into this one. But once I moved out of that house into this one, the one thing I had to have was a wood stove. Two things. I needed a garage as well to hold all my bushcrafting crap. But that was a thing for me. I always had a wood stove. I still want a wood stove. And it's hilarious. Everybody around me goes, why do you need a wood stove? And I'm like, first time power goes out, come on over and see. And the neighbors did. And funny enough, I was warm. I was cooking food. We had light. Everything was good. Barely noticed the power was off, other than it was a little darker than normal.
Yeah.
But everybody else is like, oh, our water's going to freeze. How are we going to make food? And I'm like, come on over to my place and I'll show you.
I mean, we grew up with wood. I mean, wood heat, wood stoves were a thing, and camera keeps waving.
Just gonna say, you got a lot of wiggle up and down. There you go.
But it is a thing. Like, it definitely is. But there's things like how to use a fishing rod, how to use an axe, how to properly handle a knife, how to even pass a knife to someone, how to keep an edge on it. What happens when you nick wood? How do you repair it? This is stuff that a lot of people, chainsaw. I knew a guy one time I was talking to, he had a chainsaw, and I said, what do you do when your chainsaw blade gets dull? He said, oh, I just put a new chain on it. I'm like, you do what? And he said, oh yeah. He said, I don't know how to sharp one. I'll just put a new one on. It's not worth the hassle.
You know how many chains I got out in my garage that have only been used like a handful of times because they got the slightest little nick of a rock, and they're like, I guess I'll throw it out. And I'm like, the hell you will.
Guys, what make and model of chainsaw do you have? And he said, why? I said, because I'm going to buy one so I can have your spare blades.
Exactly. Somebody pinches a burr, it starts getting burrs. Instead of filing it, throw it away. We never threw anything away in our generation. Well, not even our generation, at least our lives. Because, I don't know about Ben, but for myself, we didn't have the money to buy new. That was the necessity to a lot of this as well. I don't want to say we were poorer then. We made our money go further then because there was less off it. So we learned to make things do longer. We learned to do a lot of things on our own now that are being traded up. We learned to do a lot of things then that are now being traded off for money and convenience. You know what I mean? Like, I can remember making soap, which is a skill even people from our generation, not everybody did that, but it was one of the things Dad showed me how to do. He's like, you want to learn how to make soap? And I'm like, sure, why not? I've made soap. Little weird things like that. He was just like, you never know, maybe you'll run out of soap one day. And in the back of my head, I'm like, are you ever going to run out of soap? But it's true, you never know. I've seen, like, during COVID, all the stores shut down, things sold out. I never had to make soap, but it would have been useful then, you know what I mean? Or to distill your own alcohol and things like that. And I got to start watching what I'm saying here now. But we did a lot of stuff that made living easier. So it was less about knowing the skills and more about enriching your life already. And I guess the convenience has kind of taken over now. And bushcrafting, to me, has kind of ventured off into a lot of different things. There's like old school souls like Ben and I, which is what I'm going to throw us into, we kind of grew up in it. And we just kind of kept going with it for our lives. Then you got the new school guys who are like, you know what? These were cool skills. I would like to relearn them. Usually a younger generation or somebody from our generation that just missed that. Maybe somebody that grew up in a city or something like that, but they knew there were skills. Then you kind of get the extremist groups is what I call them. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean they kind of go to a pure side of something. Kind of like the survivalists, the people that are out there just seeing what they can torture themselves through. And Ben and I have told what...
Yeah. Survivalists and the preppers are the two.
I was going to say surviving. Ben and I have said before, the only difference between bushcraft and surviving is necessity. And we don't try to make that necessity. We always try to have a backup plan. Surviving is what you do when you have no choice. Bushcrafting is what you do when you want to have fun. But yeah, they become survivalists. They want to see what they can do and how far they can push their limits. And that's neat in their own way, but that's a whole other step for those skills. And then, as Ben said, you get the preppers. Preppers are like, oh, what happens when everything goes bad? And my problem with prepping, and it's not a problem, but my gripe with prepping, I guess, is a lot of preppers, or self-proclaimed preppers, basically watch a YouTube video once and then assume they have figured out a skill. And we have said in the past that you can watch a video as much as you want, but until you've practiced that skill a lot, it's not really doing you any good. What was it? You have to practice something 10,000 times before you're good at it? Or you're a master off it or something? There's a saying about that, and I'd have to look it up. Of course, I don't have it off the top of my head. But anyway, bottom line, you got to practice these things. And like I said, the preppers that are practicing and checking their stuff, awesome folks, good on you. But there's a significant number, and probably, and I don't have stats to put this up, but just by talking and watching, I feel like a good majority of them are getting the equipment, but not practicing the skills, which is going to make a lot of that equipment stuff pointless. I guess they'd be better off than Joe Blow, but not by much. And then you have homesteaders, which is kind of what I think we were as kids. That's where we fell in. It's not that we were purposely setting out to be homesteaders. It was just the lifestyle. And I guess those would be the ultra purists of today. A lot of those homesteaders, they're either the new gens that want to try a new direction, or they're people that came up from that background. Their parents used to live mildly, so they just inherited it. And I think it's kind of interesting that it kind of did divide out that many ways, because like I said, when you were 10, did you ever hear of a prepper?
No.
You heard of the crazy guy down the street that thought the world was going to end, right? And I'm not picking on preppers. Once again, just spitting facts here. You know what I mean? Like back in the day, most preppers were kind of extremists. Not in a bad way. Once again, not, out there causing troubles for anybody. They were just the extreme fringe of society. Now prepping is kind of a niche.
You knew dozens of people with root cellars. You knew
my grandparents had a root cellar.
You knew a lot of people who had all kinds of preserves and jams and bottled meats and stuff like that, and who knew how to make their own jerky and stuff like that. Like we did that. Like that was, I don't know how much jams and stuff. Like in the fall, we spent a lot of time preserving the food we managed to get throughout the year, because the winter it was going to be harder, and honestly it was expensive to buy a lot of this stuff. So if you could grow a couple 100 pounds of potatoes and preserve that yourself, and it doesn't take much. You just keep potatoes relatively cool and dark, and hopefully they won't grow.
Potatoes survive anything, including a nuclear holocaust, as far as I'm concerned.
And carrots were similar, and turnips, and this was why this was the food we grew a lot, because and turnip greens, I knew like I can remember them cooking those up and stuff like that. Like, it was really important.
And once, like you said, Ben, not because they had to, because it was a way of life. Supply chains weren't as abundant then. Like, to get your bananas from wherever they come from now, I'm going to assume it's like way down South America, wasn't as readily available. Like, when winter came, when I was a kid, you knew not as much was coming in. Prices of things went up. Like, your milk and your stuff actually went up in price in the winter, not because of inflation and cost of traveling and stuff like that. It was literally because it was harder to get stuff to your location. supply and demand. So you made what you had do. Instead of buying that bag of potatoes for, at the time, might have been $5 for 10 pounds or whatever, you grew your own 10 pounds and you kept it because that $5 could be used for something else. Because you never knew if you're going to get another $5.
Oh, we bought potatoes by the 100 pounds. Or I remember
50-pound bag of potatoes, I think, is what it used to be.
It was 50 pounds, big, but Mom would have the giant bag. I mean, it was bigger than I was. I remember them dragging it down into the basement, and we would go down, and you'd be taking from that for weeks.
Did you have a potato drawer? My grandparents had a potato drawer. Like, in their cabinets, their cupboards, they converted an entire drawer to a slide-out drawer. That's where the potatoes went.
Makes sense. But yeah, potatoes were part of almost every meal. You had meat and potato. You had
There's something else that's changed. How often do you eat potatoes in the run of a week now? 2-3 times? Maybe a lot? Like an actual potato. Not French fries, not some variation of a potato, but actual potato.
And even then, like, how many people make French fries? Most people buy pre-made French fries. Like, that was foolish growing up. You didn't do that. That was rare.
Fresh fries are so good, folks. And if you're going to make fresh fries, blanch them first. That's the secret. Just telling you.
But yeah, I remember all these things. I mean, those are skills that you had growing up. But it was as a young age, you already knew how to make jams. You already knew how to, like I said, set up a fishing rod to go. You know how to get the bait for the fishing rod. You knew how to set up a snare. This is things I knew before I was 10 easily. I knew how to plant a garden. This was all stuff like, I'd often by myself or with a buddy taken off in a bicycle with a backpack full of the bare necessities and went fishing for the day or went exploring for the day and come back that night. And I don't remember having a flashlight most times. Like yeah.
You felt your way around through the dark. Much the same. I can remember me and a couple of my buddies, the Nickersons. We would grab a backpack, throw in a couple of hard-boiled eggs. Don't ask me why. That was the snack that traveled. Couple bottles of usually just empty bottles, tap water, something like that. We'd fill them wherever we found water. Maybe a couple blankets, and we were gone for the night. You know what I mean? Like, oh, where you kids going? Oh, we're going to go play in the woods. Okay, have fun. And that was it. You know what I mean? We never went too far, maybe 1 kilometer or 2 away in the woods, but we had that freedom. Could you imagine telling your kids now, and I'm talking at like 7, 8 years old, you imagine telling a 7, 8-year-old now, like, here's a bag full of stuff, go sleep in the woods, have fun. That ain't going to happen. 1, they probably won't be able to do it, and 2... Child Protective Services is going to be there real fast.
Where are your kids? What are you
I
doing?
don't know. Once again, we're from the generation where if somebody says, do you know where your kids are? It was mostly a, huh?
But no. So, yeah, I mean, like I said, we said, it's different. Like, a lot of that stuff is available now, but, like, I don't know how many people really take it to heart, take it to practice. And a lot of people I know watch some of these YouTube channels of people doing it so they can live vicariously through it. And I think the next thing is the physical, mental effort to just do it. And this is the thing, like if you think about it too much, it becomes difficult. I'm going to be cold, or what would I do if I get bored, which is a really interesting one for me. But like,
who has time to be bored?
Everyone's like talking about like how difficult it is, but honestly, every time I've ever gone, no matter how much tried to stop me, how much the inertia tried to prevent me from going, once I got out there, I enjoyed it a hell of a lot more than I thought it was going to.
It's always been a good time. We have elements off it that make it potentially miserable for a short term, but the overall long-term experience has always been enjoyable in my mind. Even just going for nature walks, pick and brush. I used to hate pick and brush as a kid, and I've talked about this in the past. I want to go pick and brush this year and go make some Christmas trees for Christmas. Like, once again, it's an old skill. Who goes and picks brush and makes their own Christmas wreath anymore? Like they used to for decorations, you know what I mean? Or go into the woods and just cut your own tree from the woods instead of a Christmas tree lot or something like that. I think we're going to try things a little different this year and see how it goes. But in any case, that's 34 minutes, man. We should probably wrap this up.
But you say that now I miss going. Like I miss going. I used to remember picking like 2 or 3 Christmas trees each year. And I'd bring them home and I'd stand up in front of the house holding the 2 of them up. Mom had me turn them. And it's still, I like that one. bring the other two up to see if your grandmother wants one of them. And I go up there, and maybe one of my aunts wanted one, or one became the outside tree because we had an outside tree too most years. And so we had one that went inside in the living room, and one that we'd stick at the end of the yard, and she'd put a couple of outdoor lights on it to make it look good. That was just
So a very similar story, and I'll tell it very quickly for time's sake, but right before we lost the house in Barney's River, we upgraded. We became the rich hillbillies for like 5 seconds. We got a poured basement. So me, my grandfather, my grandmother, my sister, we'd all go pick brush. We'd bring it home to mom and my aunt. They'd make Christmas wreaths in the basement, and they would sell these off to a lot of these side stands and stuff like that. I think they used to get like $1 a wreath or something like that. They turn around and sell them for $3-4. I don't know what a wreath costs nowadays, but I guarantee it's more than that. And I always remember the house basically from the start of December until just before Christmas always smelled so much like fir trees. And I absolutely love the smell of a fir tree. And that smell to me is so nostalgic. I'll be going out walking in the woods and smell that, and it takes me back to when I was 8 years old watching Mom make wreaths. It is the weirdest thing.
It smells like Christmas. Yeah.
It does, man. Like middle of the summer, you got a nice little mist in there and it hits it and all the needles open up. You get that big whiff of fir. It's just like, yeah, I remember this. I love this.
You start getting a craving for fruitcake.
Real fruitcake too, like the stuff that you could use to shim a house up, like the good stuff.
Anyways, but yeah. So yeah, I think there's definitely been a change. I think that like, convenience has taken away some of the skills, and honestly, culturally, it's less acceptable to do some of the things we did. So it is a struggle. It is harder to do it. It is harder to get out and live that way, because society rules, culture has changed to make it less acceptable in some ways.
Well, I mean, we were probably the last generation or the start of the generation where both parents had to work. I can remember my mother being home for a lot of my childhood. She didn't have to start working until I got older. Now, I don't know if that was by design or necessity, to be perfectly honest with you.
My mom was a stay-at-home mom for most of my life. I remember a couple of years she worked because the opportunity came up. And I mean, for a lot of my life, both my parents were home because Dad worked seasonally. So, but yeah.
Anyway,
let's get out there, get everyone out there, have some fun. Love to hear like how you grew up and what was the things that got you through this. Like, how did you get into this, or is this something completely new and you're learning from us? And I pity you if you are.
Hopefully, you guys find some more information sources. But yeah, like Ben said, let us know your guys' thoughts. What do you think? Is this good, bad, otherwise? I think my personal opinion is it's not good or bad. It's just different. And as Ben said, culturally, regionally, and just technologically wise, this has become the new norm. And I don't know. I think in like 50 years, the skills that we are now taking for granted on the bare minimum of woodscrafting, once again, are probably going to be gone again because of convenience, time constraints, technological constraints, just society in general. I honestly think we are on a declining trend for bushcrafting skills, unfortunately. And I mean, I want to keep them alive as long as I can. And I know Ben wants to keep them as long as he can. So what are you folks out there doing? What do you remember? What's changing? What are you going to do to pass these skills on? Maybe that's a follow-up to this in the new year. Let us know. We'd love to talk about it. Anyway, folks, you guys have a good night. We'll talk to you next week.